On July 21st, 1999, at the annual Macworld Conference, Steve Jobs and Jason Jones introduced a brand new third-person shooter coming to the Mac, Halo. Over the years, Bungie and Apple had built a solid working relationship together, with Bungie's Marathon series representing the very best gaming experience the Mac could offer, and at times were even exclusive to Mac. They were games that Windows users couldn't touch, a fact that made Apple very, very happy. But on the other side of the computer gaming divide, Microsoft was looking to do something new, something beyond the personal computer. At the Game Developers Conference in 2000, they officially announced that they would be entering the console gaming space, taking on Sony, Nintendo, and Sega. And to do that, they would need games. So, in addition to courting developers to create versions of their existing games for Xbox, Microsoft also needed to acquire exclusives. And to that effect, they bought Bungie Studios. All of a sudden, a game that was planned for release on Mac, PC, PS2, and GameCube was to be exclusive to Microsoft's new gaming machine. However, the Xbox's planned release was just over a year away, and Bungie had a lot of work to do. Not only to just finish the game, but to get it ported over to an entirely new system they had previously had no intention of publishing on. By December, they threw their graphics engine in the trash and started over. In addition, Halo would no longer be a third-person shooter. It would be first-person, like Marathon. As a result of that rushed production schedule, when the game was first shown at E3 in 2001, people were pretty underwhelmed. The game had a poor frame rate, animations were choppy, gameplay felt simplistic. It just didn't feel like it was done, because for all intents and purposes, it wasn't. Bungie had 6 months to make one final pass, and then it was going to come out, whether it was ready or not. On November 15th, 2001, both the Xbox and Halo were released amid a massive marketing blitz. Bungie had indeed managed to fix up Halo before the release, and it was a standout title for the Xbox, receiving both critical and commercial success. People loved the single-player campaign, but what really ended up taking off was the multiplayer. Undeterred by the lack of online play in Halo, people would set up these huge LAN parties with 4 TVs, 4 Xboxes, 16 people total. Others who didn't have access to such a setup would use third-party tunneling software like GameSpy, which would create a fake LAN over the internet just so that they could play multiplayer Halo. By April of 2002, Halo had sold 1 million copies, and even more importantly for the Xbox as a platform, more than 50% of Xbox owners had a copy of Halo. It was a system seller, exactly what Microsoft needed for its fledgling console. And that success meant that Microsoft and Bungie were far from done. In July, a PC port developed by Gearbox was announced, which would finally have that online play that Halo fans wanted so badly. But Microsoft also had some surprises for Xbox players in store. In September, at Microsoft's XO2 conference, a teaser trailer was shown for Halo 2, which was announced to have full support for Microsoft's forthcoming online service, Xbox Live, which had been in beta for a few months and would launch later that year with a handful of online-capable games. But Halo fans would get their first online fix in 2003, even if it wasn't in the form many would have preferred. The first Halo was released on PC and Mac, creating a number of new fans along the way, as well as providing a preview of what the online future for Halo 2 on the Xbox might be like. It was a well-made port, improving the graphical fidelity, unlocking the frame rate, eventually even adding full modding support. Many fans would have loved to see another full Halo game in 2003, but they did at least get a sneak peek at E3, where gameplay footage of Halo 2 was shown for the first time. You could feel the excitement in the air, with cheers ringing out every time a new gameplay feature was revealed, like dual wielding or vehicle hijacking. Halo 2 was tentatively scheduled for 2004, and fans were excited. But after E3, there was very little word about the release date, other than an eventual, rather vague fall. Until finally, at E3, after a lengthy demonstration of the multiplayer map Zanzibar, Microsoft executive Peter Moore got out on the stage and set the release date in stone, revealing he had gotten a tattoo of it on his arm, November 9th. And as promised, Halo 2 did come out on that day, along with a massive surprise. Carefully concealed amidst the flurry of trailers and reviews was the fact that for a large portion of the single-player campaign, you didn't actually play as the Master Chief. You instead played as a Covenant elite named the Arbiter. But it didn't take long for fans to get over the initial shock, and in the first day of sales alone, Halo 2 made Microsoft $125 million. But just like that early E3 build of Halo 1, something about Halo 2 felt unfinished. Its ending felt rather abrupt. In fact, in an interview a few years later, it was revealed that Bungie had almost no polish time at the end of development, and that there was more of the campaign planned, but they just didn't have time. Still, what fans were really looking forward to was online multiplayer, on the now battle-tested Xbox Live service, and they got it in spades, with tons of modes to choose from, regular patches to fix game balance and exploits, even new maps released as downloadable content. Microsoft didn't have time to celebrate Halo 2's success, however. Intent on beating Sony's PlayStation 3 to market, Microsoft was feverishly working behind the scenes on the Xbox's successor. On May 12, 2005, as part of an absurdly over-the-top MTV special hosted by Elijah Wood, Microsoft unveiled the Xbox 360. This move put them significantly ahead of the PS3 and on track for release late that same year. But with a Halo game just coming out a few months prior to this announcement, there was no way that one would be ready by November, or even have footage to be shown. So in lieu of anything presentable, Bill Gates himself made a rather bold proclamation. By the time the PS3 was ready, Halo 3 would be as well, and Sony would have to deal with its release on the same day. As promised, the Xbox 360 was released on November 22, 2005. The rush to get the console out meant the launch lineup was somewhat lackluster, but it still had a few things going for it. For starters, it was the only next-generation console out, and would remain that way for a full year. But the Xbox 360 also played a select number of original Xbox games, including the all-important Halo 2, paving the way for that game to remain the most popular game on all of Xbox Live through most of the coming year. By the time 2006 rolled around, Microsoft was rapidly backtracking on Gates' claim that Halo 3 would counter the expected PS3 launch later that year. By January, the company line was basically, "It's ready when it's ready." But as a company, Microsoft had bigger concerns. With the 360 launch behind them, they had another huge product to push out the door. The latest version of their flagship product, Microsoft Windows Vista, was coming down the pipe, and they needed something to promote it to PC game enthusiasts, a group of people who were perfectly happy with what Windows XP offered them already. In what seemed like a boneheaded move, even at the time, Microsoft planned to lure these diehards to their new operating system using a port of Halo 2, a game that had come out over a year earlier at this point. The hype just wasn't there, and frankly, PC players had better things to play by this point, not to mention that Microsoft making it a Vista exclusive felt artificial and unnecessary. Still, PC players would get another port of a mainline Halo game, something they wouldn't get ever again. Even though they wouldn't get a new Halo game, fans would get two reveals in 2006. First, at E3, a reveal of the game everyone was waiting for, Halo 3. No gameplay to speak of, but just enough to get fans excited, along with the promise that the trailer was running in real time, in the new Halo 3 engine. Then, at Exo 6, a surprise. Ensemble, the creators of the Age of Empires series, were working on a Halo RTS, exclusively for the Xbox 360, called Halo Wars. Now, just like Halo 3, they showed an incredible-looking cinematic trailer, and nothing else. But what no one knew at the time was that Ensemble was also working on something much bigger, something that would never see the light of day. In addition to Halo Wars, Ensemble was also creating a Halo MMO, under the codename Titan. While never officially announced to the public before it was cancelled, quite a few early screenshots and early concept art have been leaked in the intervening years. In short, Ensemble was used to competing with Blizzard in the RTS realm, and now that World of Warcraft was finding such huge amounts of success, they thought that they might be able to compete in the MMO realm as well. But a changing of the guard at Microsoft meant it was not to be. 2007 was to be the year of Halo 3. It was finally time for the Xbox 360's biggest system seller to shine, and Microsoft was going to make the most of that marketing opportunity. There were, of course, the usual bombastic trailers with 3D rendered cinematics and exciting explosions, but Microsoft also played around with live action, even a series of ads featuring a massive diorama. If there was something they could do to sell more copies of Halo 3 and more Xbox 360s, they were going to do it. And that extended well beyond the television advertisements. In April, Bungie announced that they would be running a limited-time beta of the game from May 16th to June 6th. To get in, players either had to jump through a set of hoops or buy a copy of the game Crackdown. And let's just say there were a lot of used copies of Crackdown on the market come mid-June. The beta itself featured 3 maps from the full game, as well as a surprising number of modes and features, all specifically chosen to build hype for the coming release of Halo 3. Right smack dab in the middle of all that excitement for Halo 3, Microsoft unceremoniously and with very little fanfare shoved Halo 2 for Windows Vista out the door, where it almost immediately flopped. Unlike Halo PC, Halo 2 didn't add any enticing new features other than custom maps, and more importantly, Vista had already proven itself to be a dud. But then, the big event finally happened. On September 25th, Halo 3 finally launched, almost 2 years after the Xbox 360 had hit the market, and almost a full year after the PS3 had come out. The game made $170 million in US sales on its very first day, and made another $130 million by the end of the week. But Halo 3 wasn't just a commercial success, it was also a critical one. Unlike Halo 2, which had mostly just tuned and tweaked bits of the first game, adding on where necessary, Halo 3 was a huge overhaul, changing a ton of things for the better, whether it was mechanically or graphically, thanks to the new console it called home. In addition, thanks to the massively overhauled Xbox Live with the Xbox 360, Bungie was able to add 4-player online co-op and greatly streamline the matchmaking experience. And then, some news came out that was clearly withheld until Halo 3 had been released. Bungie was splitting away from Microsoft. They assured their fans that they would keep making Halo games for the foreseeable future. But suddenly, Bungie was a separate company, one that could make their own decisions. And the future of the franchise, for the first time, was in doubt. It would take quite a while for Bungie to reassure their fans. After some sort of Halo game announcement was delayed multiple times through 2008, finally, at TGS in October, Bungie announced Halo 3 Recon, a game where you would play as a character other than the Master Chief. This game would come packed with Halo 3 maps, but the game itself would be cheap and a shortened single-player experience, only about 3 to 5 hours. Later that same year, the name of this game was changed to Halo 3 ODST, a reference to the orbital drop shock troopers who you played as, first introduced in Halo 2, and the game was slated for the following year. But first, there was something else Halo-related that had been in development for quite a while. In May of 2009, Halo Wars was finally released, and Ensemble Studios was shut down immediately afterwards. Reception to the game was lukewarm. This was certainly the best console RTS that had ever been made, and it had an interesting Halo story as well as excellent cinematics, but people still couldn't agree if a real-time strategy game actually worked on a console controller or not. Meanwhile, Halo 3 ODST was undergoing huge changes. The game was no longer a cheap 3 to 5 hour game. It would feature a full-length Halo campaign, and also include a disc with the full Halo 3 multiplayer experience, including all of the DLC maps that had been released so far. The game itself was released in September, to critical praise of its new open hub world and its darker, more moody environments. ODST takes place in what really amounts to 2 different worlds, although it is technically the same city. In one, you're wandering through a city at night, fighting off Covenant as you go, and finding relics of events from the past in an open world where you can choose where to go next. After finding an object, you have a flashback to an event. Now, these flashbacks are basically just traditional Halo missions, featuring completely different characters than the one you're playing as during the night sequences, allowing Bungie to tell a broader story. For the multiplayer portion of the package, in addition to Halo 3's multiplayer in its entirety on a second disc, the game also included a new co-op multiplayer mode called Firefight, where you fight off massive numbers of enemies, Bungie's take on the Gears of War Horde mode. Later that same year, Bungie announced that they would take one last stab at the franchise. Saying that it would likely be their final project, they announced Halo Reach, their first prequel, based on a novel that had been written to promote the first game. Halo: The Fall of Reach. Microsoft was very quick to note that, despite the fact that Bungie seemed to be leaving the series behind, the franchise would continue, announcing the formation of a brand new Microsoft-backed development studio called 343 Industries. This would very specifically be Microsoft's Halo studio, and they would only work on Halo-related projects. On September 14th, 2010, Bungie's final entry in the Halo series they had begun 9 years earlier was released. Halo Reach closed the loop on the Bungie timeline by better expanding on the events that had led to the first Halo. While the campaign of Reach was met with almost universal praise, people were far more split on the multiplayer. More specifically, whether or not new additions like jetpacks and sprinting equipment actually added to the game or detracted from it. Still, Halo Reach enjoyed a rather healthy number of players, and remained in the top 3 Xbox Live games for the first year of its existence. By 2011, 343 Industries was finally ready to reveal what they had been working on, their vision for the future of the Halo franchise. First, to celebrate the 10th anniversary of Halo Combat Evolved, they revealed an extensive remaster of the game that would completely revamp the graphics of the original. Second, they unveiled the first mainline sequel to a Halo game since 2007 in the form of Halo 4. The reveal trailer picked up right where the legendary ending for Halo 3 had left off, with the Master Chief approaching a Forerunner world. Fans were excited to see Master Chief back in the picture, but were somewhat tentative about 343's credentials and their ability to build a Halo game without just replicating what had been done before. But the next release, planned for later in 2011, Halo Combat Evolved Anniversary, was exactly that. Given a development cycle of just a single year, 343 Industries, Saber Interactive, and Certain Affinity would work together to make the project a reality. Saber did most of the work on the single player, porting the code for the original game into their proprietary engine, meaning that everything would feel exactly the same. The player could even switch back and forth between the two graphical styles. Meanwhile, Certain Affinity was given the job of creating the multiplayer. But much to the dismay of Halo fans, they chose to remake specific maps inside of Halo Reach's multiplayer mode instead of recreating the multiplayer of the original. Still, Anniversary's budget price of $40 at launch made it palatable, and it served its purpose of tiding over the hardcore Halo fans until the release of Halo 4. And just as planned, that release came the following year. On November 6, 2012, the world got to see the first game in 343's planned Halo trilogy. But the reception of the game was decidedly mixed. Reviews were positive enough, and the overall package was pretty good, but there were also some pretty serious missteps in the eyes of Halo fans. For the first time in the history of the series, Halo 4 assumed a level of knowledge from the player about what had happened in content outside of the games, like the many Halo books that had been published. This left a number of Halo players, people that had only ever played the games and never engaged with outside content, rather confused. Moreover, while the game's multiplayer component initially enjoyed a warm reception, the surprising lack of balance patches and the almost immediate release of Call of Duty Black Ops 2 meant the multiplayer population of Halo 4 dropped off and never really recovered. While other Halo games had enjoyed years atop the lists of the most popular Xbox Live games, Halo 4 fell flat relatively quickly. But for Microsoft, Halo 4 was a huge success. The game grossed $220 million on its first day, going on to make $300 million in its first week, making it the biggest release in history for Microsoft Studios. Early the next year, in 2013, Microsoft finally announced a new Xbox in the form of the Xbox One. This had been the biggest gap between console generations in the history of the industry, but after 8 years, it was time to move on. However, Microsoft's vision of the future clashed with what consumers actually wanted. They would be unable to trade or lend games, used games would be impossible to sell other than through authorized retailers, the console would be required to connect to the internet regularly. The list goes on and on. In order to try and get people excited about the console at E3, Microsoft showed the first cinematic trailer for a new, untitled Halo game made by 343. But even that wasn't enough. People were angry, and with Sony announcing that they would not implement similar restrictions, Microsoft was forced to back down. Meanwhile, a new spin-off of the Halo series was quietly released, a rather mediocre twin-stick shooter called Halo Spartan Assault. which met with an appropriately mediocre critical response. Moreover, the game certainly wasn't helped by the fact it was initially only playable on Windows 8 devices, an operating system that had failed to gain any sort of real acceptance. On November 22, 2013, the Xbox One was released. While it sold very well, it lagged behind sales of the PS4. This time, Microsoft didn't have the advantage of launching a year early, and once again, much like the launch of the Xbox 360, Microsoft lacked a real flagship game like a Halo to sell the console. And no, the release of Spartan Assault on Xbox One that December doesn't count. There were some who believed Halo 5 would be coming in 2014, but by May, Microsoft was publicly proclaiming the release window as sometime in the next year. Instead of a new mainline Halo game, 2014 would be the year of the Master Chief Collection, which Microsoft announced at E3. This bundle would contain Halo 1, 2, 3, and 4, as well as fully intact online multiplayer for all of them. Halo 2 would get the anniversary treatment with beautiful new cutscenes done by Blur Studios, while 3 and 4 would be upscaled to 1080p and run at 60 FPS. When the game came out later that year, there's no nice way to put this, it was a debacle. The multiplayer basically didn't work at all, with matchmaking being almost completely broken. And even when you did manage to get yourself into a game, there were still glitches all over the place. The single player was mostly intact, but even there it felt like the game had been rushed out the door. As of October 2015, the Master Chief Collection still has unresolved issues that have never been addressed, despite patch after patch after patch. But attached to that collection was also a beta for Halo 5, which had multiplayer that actually worked. The reaction was mostly positive, though some Halo fans took issue with the huge changes that had been made to the core formula in the name of modernizing the gameplay. Others, however, praised this modernization effort, saying it made the game more appealing in the modern climate. Early 2015 saw a surprise release of sorts, a game called Halo Online. The first traditional Halo game to come to the PC since Halo 2, Halo Online is a free-to-play game that only officially exists in Russia, developed by the people responsible for much of Halo Combat Evolved Anniversary, Saber Interactive. It plays similarly to Halo 3, with a ton of free-to-play microtransactions built in, and there are no current plans to bring it to any other country. In addition, 2015 has also seen the release of another twin-stick shooter, Spartan Strike, a sequel to Spartan Assault, which actually managed to garner worse reviews than the first one did. But now, in October, the day before Halo 5 comes out, we once again stand on the edge of the release of a new mainline Halo game. Will it be a return to form for the series, or will it continue the downward trend? It's just about time to find out.